The pattern. The archive chamber hummed with the whisper of a trillion stored memories. Archivist Kelix of the confluence, a being of crystalline thought matrices and temporal perception, floated before the human historical records with what her species approximated as dread. She had spent 300 cycles studying humanity. 300 cycles watching their rise from a single blue world to an empire spanning 47 systems. 300 cycles searching for the answer to one question. Why did every species that encountered humanity either kneel or perish? The humans called it the Pax Humana. The rest of the galaxy whispered darker names. Kelix began her review where she always did, at the beginning. Year 312 BCE by their reckoning. The neural matrix flickered to life, projecting the memories harvested from archaeological sites, from DNA fragments, from the quantum echoes that all violent deaths left in spacetime. Timeline Alpha, Macedon, Earth. Commander Thashan of the Silver Shield stood in the burning ruins of Persepolis, his bronze armor slick with blood that wasn't his own. Around him, his men looted the greatest city the world had ever known. They had marched 20,000 miles for this moment. They had crossed mountains, deserts, and rivers. They had defeated armies 10 times their size. And now they stood at the heart of the Persian Empire, victors. Thashan's lieutenant, a scarred veteran named Corvus, approached with a chest of gold. The men ask what we do with the prisoners, Commander. There are thousands. Thashan looked across the burning city. Once he might have felt something, mercy perhaps, or hesitation. That was before the march, before the battles, before he understood what his King Alexander truly sought. Not just conquest. Transformation. Show them what it means to resist Macedon, Thashan said quietly. Show them what we've become. Corvus nodded, understanding perfectly. He changed too. They all had. Somewhere between the Granicus River and this moment, they'd stopped being soldiers defending their homeland. They'd become something else. Something with fangs. By dawn, the screams had stopped. The Persian Empire's heart had been torn out, and the Silver Shields had learned they could do anything, if their king commanded it. Kelix paused the memory, her matrices shuddering. She'd seen this recording 100 times. It never became easier. She jumped forward. 2,000 years. Timeline Beta, Caribbean Sea, Earth. Captain Marlowe Hendricks stood on the deck of the HMS Retribution, watching the island burn. The indigenous people who'd lived there for 10,000 years were gone now, sold, slaughtered, or fled into the mountains to die slowly of European diseases. The sugar plantations would be profitable beyond imagination. His first mate, a former privateer named Grayson Thorne, stood beside him. The company directors will be pleased. We've secured the whole archipelago. Hendricks nodded, thinking of his childhood in London, of the philosophy tutors who taught him about civilization and progress, about bringing light to dark places. He believed it once. Now he knew the truth. Empire wasn't about light. It was about appetite. Send word to London, Hendricks said. Tell them the Caribbean is ours. Every island, every harbor, every soul. And the native treaties? Thorne asked. Hendricks smiled, and it was the smile of a predator. What treaties? There's no one left to honor them. The British Empire had found its fangs in the sugar fields and slave ships. It had learned that morality was negotiable, that conscience could be silenced, that anything, could be justified if it brought profit and power. Kelix fast-forwarded again, her dread deepening. The pattern was emerging. Always the same. Humans building something, a kingdom, an empire, a civilization, and then, at the heart of their success, discovering they could be monsters. And choosing to be. Timeline Gamma, Viridian Colony, Proxima System, 2287 CE. Director Cassius Vex stood in the observation dome of Settlement Prime, looking down at the Viridian surface. The indigenous species, the QLesh, a peaceful race of photosynthetic scholars, had occupied this world for 50,000 years. They'd been evacuated 3 days ago. The ones who'd resisted were buried in mass graves outside the dome. Vex chief of operations, a woman named Rena Salas, handed him a data tablet. Resource extraction can begin immediately. The QLesh terraforming has made this world perfect for human agriculture. We're looking at food production capable of feeding 20 core worlds. Vex nodded slowly. He'd been a humanitarian once back on Earth. He'd protested corporate exploitation, fought for alien rights, believed humanity could be better than its history. Then he'd been offered this position. Then he'd seen the projections, the hunger, the overcrowding, the desperate need for expansion. Then he'd made his choice. Begin phase 2, Vex said. I want full colonization within the year. And if the galactic confluence protests? Rena asked. Beck smiled. It was Hendrix's smile, Fashion's smile, the smile of every human who'd ever stood at the heart of empire and realized what power truly meant. Let them protest. They'll learn what the Persians learned, what the Caribbean tribes learned, what the QLS just learned. He gestured to the stars beyond the dome, to the 47 systems humanity now claimed. We're apex predators wearing civilization as a mask. And we're done pretending otherwise. Calyx terminated the memory streams, her matrices flickering with distress. 3 timelines. 3 empires. 3 moments where humanity found its fangs. But this was only the beginning. The worst was yet to come. She had to understand. She had to know if humanity could ever be stopped, or if the galaxy would simply burn until there was nothing left but human flags on dead worlds. The archive hummed. Calyx steeled herself and opened the next file. The gift. Timeline Delta. Kirillon Station, Outer Rim, 2340 CE. Ambassador Lydia Morganta materialized on the Kirillon diplomatic platform, her face arranged in an expression of practiced warmth. Around her, the galaxy's most powerful species had gathered. The crystalline confluence, the hive mind Screeth, the ancient void singers who'd witnessed the birth of stars. They'd called this emergency summit for one reason: humanity. Lydia was here to explain why the Pax Humana was good, actually. Why 47 systems under human control was just the beginning. Why the galaxy should welcome Earth's embrace. The Confluence Arbiter, an entity named Calyx Variant 7, spoke first. Her voice resonated through quantum frequencies. Ambassador Morganta. Your species has existed in galactic space for 93 standard years. In that time, you've claimed more territory than most species acquire in millennia. You've displaced 14 indigenous populations. You've refused to sign the Sentience Accords. Explain yourself. Lydia smiled. She'd prepared for this. Arbiter Calyx, esteemed delegates, she began, her voice carrying across the chamber. Humanity doesn't apologize for our success. We've simply applied the same principles that built our civilization on Earth. A Screeth delegate, its chitinous mass rippling with agitation, interrupted. You mean exploitation? Genocide? Colonial extraction? I mean advancement, Lydia countered smoothly. Yes, our history is violent. But that violence forged us into problem solvers, innovators, survivors. Every human empire, Macedonian, Roman, British, American, corporate, taught us valuable lessons. We learned that sentiment is weakness, that hesitation costs lives, that the strong have a duty to dominate the weak for everyone's benefit. The chamber erupted in protests, but Lydia continued, raising her voice. You call it imperialism. We call it order. Before humanity reached the Outer Rim, there were 14 species here fighting over resources. Now there's peace. Our peace. Pax Humana. Calyx's matrices flickered with what might have been rage. You created that peace by exterminating the QLS, enslaving the Meridian Collective, and bombing 3 colony worlds into submission. Lydia's smile never wavered. We did what was necessary. And I'll tell you what humanity learned in its darkest hours, Arbiter. We learned that morality is a luxury of the powerful. Ethics are negotiable. And the universe doesn't care about fairness, it cares about strength. She activated a holographic display, showing humanity's territorial expansion. In 3 generations we'll control 100 systems. In 5, perhaps 300. Not through diplomacy or cooperation, but through understanding of fundamental truth. She leaned forward and for the first time the mask of civility slipped. The ambassador showed her fangs. We're predators. We always have been. And at the heart of every human empire, we discovered the same gift. The capacity for absolute ruthlessness in service of our survival. You can condemn us, sanction us, even fight us. But you can't stop us. Because we'll do whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. The summit dissolved into chaos. But Lydia had accomplished her mission. She told them the truth. Humanity had found its fangs. And they'd never let go. Back in the archive, Calyx watched the memory of her variant self's humiliation with growing horror. The pattern was accelerating. Each timeline showed humanity learning the same lesson, becoming the same monster. But there was one timeline left. One she'd been avoiding. Timeline Epsilon. The turning point. She opened the file with trembling matrices. Timeline Epsilon. Battle of the Shrieking Dark, 2389 CE. Fleet Admiral Tavian Cross stood on the bridge of the inevitable, humanity's first reality-warping dreadnought. Around him in the black, 6,000 human warships faced the combined armada of the galactic confluence. Every species that had decided humanity's expansion must end. They outnumbered humanity's fleet 3-1. Tavian's tactical officer, Commander Iris Nakamura, ran the projections. "Admiral, if we engage we lose. Even with the reality drives, the numbers are against us." Tavian nodded slowly. He'd read the histories. He knew what came next. He'd seen the pattern. Thashin at Persepolis. Hendrix in the Caribbean. Vex on Viridian Prime. Morganta at Kirillon Station. Each had stood at the heart of empire and made the same choice. "Open a channel," Tavian said quietly. "All frequencies." The quantum band crackled to life. Every ship in both fleets could hear him. "This is Fleet Admiral Tavian Cross of the Terran Imperium. I'm addressing the Confluence Fleet and I'm addressing my own people." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I've studied human history. I know what we are. What we've always been. Conquerors. Killers. Empire builders who justify any atrocity in the name of progress." On the Confluence flagship, Kelix herself listened, her matrices humming with desperate hope. Was this it? Was this human finally going to break the pattern? "I could give the order right now," Tavian continued. "I could activate the reality drives and tear a hole in spacetime that would consume your entire fleet. I could win this battle and prove, once again, that humanity's fangs are the sharpest in the galaxy." Iris looked at him, her hand hovering over the weapon's control. "Admiral?" Tavian closed his eyes, thinking of Thashin, of Hendrix, of all the humans who'd stood at this precipice and chosen murder. "But I'm not going to," he said softly. The bridge went silent. "I'm not going to," he repeated louder this time. "Because I've seen where this pattern leads. I've read the reports from Viridian Prime, from the Caribbean, from Persepolis. I know what happens when humanity finds its fangs." He opened his eyes and they were wet. "We devour everything. Including ourselves." Kelix's matrices surged with something she'd never felt studying humans before. Hope. "So I'm making a different choice," Tavian said. "I'm ordering the Terran fleet to stand down. We're withdrawing from contested systems. We're opening negotiations. And we're going to try, for the first time in human history, to build something without our fangs." The channel went dead. And the galaxy held its breath. The teeth behind the smile. Timeline Epsilon continued. Peace Talks, Unity Station 2390 CE. The negotiation chamber was designed for species of every configuration. Gravity wells for the dense-bodied, atmosphere pockets for the gas breathers, quantum fields for the confluence. At the center, Admiral Tavian Cross sat across from Arbiter Kelix and representatives from 19 species. It had been 6 months since the Shrieking Dark standoff. 6 months of fragile ceasefire. Lyric Ashwood, humanity's new chief diplomat, presented the Terran Accord, a document limiting human expansion, establishing reparations for displaced species and creating oversight committees. "We're proposing a fundamental restructuring," Lyric explained, her auburn hair tied back severely, her expression earnest. "Humanity recognizes our historical pattern of exploitation. We're committing to a different path." A Void Singer delegate, an ancient being named Resonance of Distant Sorrow, pulsed skeptically. "Your species has made promises before. Your own archives show treaty after broken treaty." Tavian leaned forward. "You're right. Which is why we're proposing something unprecedented, binding behavioral protocols enforced by AI watchdogs with killswitch authority over our military. If we violate the accord, our own systems will shut us down." The chamber rippled with surprise. Kelix's matrices hummed with cautious optimism. "This is unexpected," she admitted. "The projection suggested you'd never voluntarily limit your expansion." Lyric smiled sadly. "Maybe we learned something. Maybe standing at the edge of galactic war showed us what we'd become. Maybe we finally want to be better than our history." The talks continued for weeks. Humanity made concession after concession. They agreed to return 3 occupied systems. They accepted confluence monitors on all colony worlds. They even agreed to a 50-year moratorium on military expansion. Kelix began to believe. Perhaps humans could change. Perhaps the pattern could be broken. She should have known better. Timeline Epsilon, Deep Space 2391 CE. The facility had no name, no official designation. It didn't exist in any database. It floated in the dark between stars, a shadow among shadows. Inside, Director Rena Salas, the same woman who'd helped Cassius Vex cleanse Viridian Prime, stood in a laboratory that would have made the galaxy's ethicists scream. If they'd known about it. "Status report," she said crisply. Her lead scientist, Dr. Kivin Thrace, gestured to a series of containment pods. Inside each, something writhed. The convergence program is ahead of schedule. We've successfully weaponized QLESH biology, reverse-engineered Screeth neural architecture, and cracked the confluence's quantum matrices. Rena nodded, moving to a viewing port. Beyond it, a fleet was being constructed. Not just any fleet, vessels incorporating technology from every species humanity had peacefully studied during the talks. And the timeline? She asked. 5 years. Maybe 3 if we expedite. By the time the Accord restrictions expire, we'll have tech superiority over every confluence species combined. Rena smiled. It was the smile Tavian Cross had never shown at the peace talks. The smile that Lyric Ashwood hid behind her diplomatic warmth. It was humanity's real smile. The one with fangs. Perfect, Rena said. Keep them talking. Keep them believing we've changed. By the time they realize the truth, it'll be too late. On a secure channel, a message arrived from Earth. From the Terran Council itself. Project Fenrir approved. Make them trust us. Then make them kneel. Rena deleted the message and returned to work. This was humanity's real gift, not the fangs themselves but the ability to hide them. To smile and negotiate and promise peace while sharpening knives in the dark. They'd learned from every empire before them. The best predators don't announce themselves. They make their prey feel safe first. Unity Station Observation Deck. Tavian Cross stood alone looking out at the stars. Behind him the door opened. Lyric Ashwood entered. The Confluence approved the final Accord provisions, she said softly. They believe us. They actually believe we've changed. Tavian didn't turn around. Do you ever wonder if we should? Actually change, I mean. Lyric was quiet for a long moment. Every day. But then I remember the projections. Humanity's population growth. Resource scarcity. The mathematical certainty of our extinction if we don't expand. So we lie. So we survive. Lyric moved beside him. Thashin didn't want to burn Persepolis. Hendrix probably hated what he did in the Caribbean. Vex on Viridian Prime, I've read his personal logs. He cried himself to sleep for a month. But they did it anyway, Tavian finished. Because at the heart of every empire, humanity finds its fangs. Not because we're evil, Admiral. Because we're desperate. Because we're survivors. Because when you're the only species willing to do whatever it takes, you become the apex predator by default. Tavian closed his eyes. What does that make us? Alive, Lyric said simply. While everyone else sleeps soundly, trusting our promises, we'll be working, building, preparing. And when the time comes, we'll strike. Lyric nodded. Just like always. They stood in silence, 2 humans carrying the weight of their species' dark gift. The capacity for ruthlessness. The willingness to smile while holding a knife. The terrible, necessary fangs that had carried humanity from caves to stars. Outside, the Confluence fleet maintained its peaceful orbit, convinced that humanity had finally evolved beyond its violent past. They had no idea the predator was already inside their walls. Kelix, reviewing these events from her archive 3 centuries later, finally understood. The horror wasn't that humanity found its fangs. It was that they'd learned to hide them so well. The Reckoning. Timeline Epsilon. The Forgotten Moon, Sigma Draconis, 2396 CE. 5 years. That's how long the lie lasted. Kelix materialized on the barren moon where she'd requested the meeting, her quantum matrices barely stable. Across from her, Tavian Cross stood in a containment suit, his face older, harder. You wanted to see me, Arbiter? His voice carried a weariness that hadn't been there at the peace talks. I know, Kelix said simply. Project Fenrir. The Shadow Fleet. The biological weapons derived from QLESH genetics. The neural architecture you stole from the Screeth. All of it. Tavian's expression didn't change. I see. Is that all you have to say? Kelix's matrices flared with something beyond rage, betrayal. We trusted you. I convinced the Confluence that humanity could change. I believed you, Admiral. I know. Tavian looked away toward the gas giant that Sigma Draconis B orbited. For what it's worth, I wanted to be the person you believed in. Then why? The question tore from Kelix's core. Why smile and negotiate and promise peace while building weapons designed to exterminate us? Tavian was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. There's a child on Earth. Name's Maven Reeves. She's 7 years old. She draws pictures of alien friends she'll never meet because she lives in a settlement where the recycled air is at 40% capacity. Where food is rationed. where her parents work 16-hour shifts just to maintain life support. He finally looked at Kellex. There are 10 billion mavens on Earth and the colonies, and the projections say that in 20 years, there'll be 20 billion. 30 billion the decade after that. We can't stop reproducing, Arbiter. It's hardwired into us. And we can't survive on the systems we have. So you lie. You cheat. You steal. So we do what we've always done, Tavian corrected. We find our fangs and we survive. Thashan burned Persepolis because Macedon needed the Persian wealth. Hendrix enslaved the Caribbean because Britain needed the labor and resources. Every human empire that ever existed did terrible things for the same reason. Their people needed to live. Kellex pulsed with cold fury. And the 15 species you'll exterminate when Project Fenrir launches? Do they not have children? Do they not deserve to survive? Of course they do. Tavian's voice cracked slightly. Don't you understand, Arbiter? That's the tragedy. We're not monsters who enjoy this. We're desperate animals backed into a corner by our own biology. And when an animal is cornered, it bites. Then you are monsters, Kellex said flatly. Because you choose to be. Do we? Tavian pulled out a data pad, projected a series of scenarios. These are the simulations we ran. Every possible path forward for humanity. Peaceful coexistence. We collapse from overpopulation in 30 years. Birth restrictions, civilization-wide riots and the fall of every government. Sustainable systems sharing. The confluent species provide enough resources for maybe 2 billion humans. The other 8 billion starve. He swiped to the final simulation. Or Project Fenrir. We take what we need. We ensure humanity's survival. And yes, other species suffer. But we live. That's not a choice, Kellex said. That's an excuse. Maybe. Tavian deactivated the display. But it's the excuse every human empire has used. And it's kept us alive for 10,000 years. Kellex's matrices dimmed with despair. So you'll launch Fenrir. You'll weaponize everything you learned during the peace talks. You'll shatter the confluence and take whatever systems you want. No, Tavian said quietly. Kellex froze. What? I'm not launching Fenrir, Arbiter. I'm here to warn you. He pulled out a second device, a data core. This contains everything. Fleet positions, weapon specifications, activation codes. I'm giving it to you. I don't understand. Tavian smiled sadly. I told you. I wanted to be the person you believed in. I'm not. I'm just another human standing at the heart of empire, fangs bared, ready to do terrible things. But maybe I can be the one who finally says no. He held out the data core. Take it. Use it. Dismantle Fenrir before it launches. Save your species from what mine is about to do. Kellex took the core with trembling matrices. They'll execute you for this. Your own people. I know. You're condemning humanity to the collapse scenarios. The starvation. The riots. I know that too. Tavian looked up at the stars. But maybe that's what we deserve, Arbiter. Maybe we need to finally face what we are without the fangs. Maybe we need to suffer the consequences of our choices instead of making others suffer them. Why? Kellex asked. Why sacrifice yourself? Your species. Tavian thought of Maven Reeves drawing pictures of alien friends. He thought of Thashan standing in burning Persepolis. Of Hendrix watching islands burn. Of Cassius Vex ordering the QLS into mass graves. Because I read the histories, he said simply. And I realized something. Every time humanity found its fangs, we survived. But we also lost something. Our souls. Our humanity. The very thing that made us worth saving in the first place. He turned to leave, then paused. There's one more thing on that core, Arbiter. Instructions for how to help humanity find a different way. If you want to. If you think we're worth saving. I don't know if you are, Kellex admitted. Neither do I, Tavian said. But maybe it's time we found out. He walked away, leaving Kellex alone on the barren moon, holding the future of 2 species in her quantum matrices. Behind him, the galaxy held its breath again. But this time the choice wasn't humanity's. Earth Military Command 3 days later. Director Rena Salas stood before the Terran Council, her face a mask of controlled fury. Admiral Cross has committed treason. He's given the confluence everything. Fenrir is compromised. Our entire strategic advantage is gone. The council members, 12 humans from across the Empire, sat in stunned silence. Finally, the council chair, an ancient woman named Zephyr Blackwood, spoke. Options. We accelerate, Rena said immediately. Launch what we have now before the confluence can prepare. It won't be the clean victory we planned, but we can still win. Casualties. Billions. On both sides. Zephyr looked around the council chamber, at the desperate faces, the calculated expressions, the weight of 10 billion souls pressing down on their shoulders. Do it, she said. And humanity bared its fangs once more. The price of Fangs. Timeline Epsilon. The Confluence Core Worlds 2396 CE. The attack came at dawn by Galactic Standard Time. 3,000 human warships dropped out of quantum space simultaneously, targeting the 17 primary confluence worlds. On the lead vessel, the inexorable Director Rena Salas watched the tactical displays with cold efficiency. This wasn't the clean, overwhelming victory Project Fenrir had promised. This was brutal, desperate, and visible. The whole galaxy would watch humanity bare its fangs. First wave firing, her tactical officer reported. Reality-warping torpedoes streaked across the black, each one carrying technology humanity had reverse-engineered from the very species they now attacked. On the confluence homeworld of Crystallis Prime, Arbiter Kelix felt the first impacts through her quantum connection to the planetary matrix. Billions of her kind, screaming in frequencies that shattered spacetime itself. She'd had 3 days with Tavian's data core. 3 days to prepare, to evacuate, to build defenses. It wasn't enough. Activate the cross protocols, she commanded, her matrices burning with desperate determination. Tavian's final gift, hidden in the data core alongside the Fenrir intelligence, was a defensive framework. Not enough to win but enough to survive. Barely. The Confluence fleet engaged and space tore itself apart. Earth, Residential Sector 7, New Seattle. 7-year-old Maven Reeves sat in her classroom when the emergency broadcasts began. Her teacher, a tired woman named Elsyra Quinn, tried to maintain order as the children panicked. "It's okay," Elsyra said, her voice shaking. "We're safe here. The war is far away." But Maven had seen her parents' faces that morning. She'd heard them whispering about Admiral Cross's execution, about the emergency military conscription, about the food rationing that was about to get much, much worse. She pulled out her drawings, colorful pictures of humans and aliens playing together, exploring strange worlds, building things instead of destroying them. "Miss Quinn," Maven asked quietly, "why are we fighting?" Elsyra knelt beside the child, tears in her eyes. "Because, sweetheart, because sometimes people get scared. And scared people do terrible things. But we're the good guys, right?" Elsyra looked at the drawings, at the innocent hope in them, and couldn't answer. The Battle of Crystallis Prime, Hour 17. Commander Iris Nakamura, now captain of the Relentless, coordinated the assault on the Confluence's primary defense station. Her crew, mostly young recruits who joined after Tavian's execution, followed orders with mechanical precision. They'd been told this was necessary. That humanity's survival depended on victory. But as Iris watched another Confluence civilian transport disintegrate under her guns, hundreds of thousands of lives snuffed out in an instant, she felt something inside her break. "Captain," her weapons officer said, a kid barely 20 named Jax Winters, "we have a clear shot at the civilian evacuation corridor." "Orders." Iris stared at the tactical display. The evacuation ships were unarmed, protected only by the treaty laws humanity had agreed to 5 years ago. Laws they were now shredding. She thought of Tavian Cross standing before the firing squad, his last words echoing across every human channel. "I betrayed my species so we might finally learn what we're becoming. Remember this moment. Remember what we choose." "Captain?" Jax pressed. "The evacuation corridor?" Iris made her choice. "Let them go. Target the military installations only." "Ma'am, Director Salas's orders are to maximize casualties." "I don't care." Iris's voice was steel. "We're not going to murder refugees. We can win this war without becoming the monsters our history says we are." Across the fleet, other captains faced the same choice. Some, like Iris, drew a line. Others followed Rena Salas's orders to the letter. By the end of the first day, the Confluence had lost 6 billion souls. Humanity had lost 1 billion. And the war had only begun. The Confluence Sanctuary World of Lumina's Rest, Week 3. Kelix had retreated here with what remained of the Confluence Council. The Sanctuary World was designed to be undetectable, a final refuge if the worst ever happened. The worst had happened. Around her, the representatives of 19 species argued, their fear and rage creating dissonant harmonies that would have been beautiful in any other context. "We must surrender," the Screeth Prime said, its hive mind fractured by losses. "Humanity is unstoppable. Better to submit and survive than fight and perish. Never, a void singer pulsed. We are ancient. We've witnessed stars born and die. We will not kneel to hairless apes who've barely left their cradle world. Kelix listened to them all, her matrices running calculations. The cross protocols had saved billions, but they couldn't win the war. Humanity's willingness to sacrifice everything, morality, mercy, even their own people, made them tactically superior. At the heart of empire, they'd found their fangs. And they knew how to use them. There is another option, Kelix said quietly. The chamber fell silent. Admiral Cross gave us more than defensive protocols. He gave us a map. A way to reach Earth itself, bypassing every human military installation. She displayed the data. We could end this war in a single strike. You mean genocide, the Screeth Prime said flatly. You mean becoming exactly what they are. I mean survival, Kelix countered. Isn't that what Cross said? Every species does what it must to survive. The Void Singer pulsed with horror. If we destroy Earth, we prove that humanity is right. That the galaxy is nothing but predators pretending to be civilized. That fangs are all that matter. But we'd be alive, Kelix said, and hated herself for it. She was standing at the same precipice Thashin had stood at, the same edge Hendrix and Vex and every human empire builder had faced. The moment where survival demanded monstrosity. The moment where fangs seemed like the only answer. I will not give that order, the Void Singer declared. Better we die than become them. Then we die, the Screeth Prime said bitterly. And humanity spreads across the galaxy, doing to others what they've done to us. How is that better? Kelix felt the weight of the choice crushing her quantum matrices. Strike at Earth and commit the same genocide humanity had committed against the QLesh. Or maintain moral superiority while watching her people perish. She thought of Tavian Cross, executing himself to show humanity what they were becoming. She thought of Maven Reeves, drawing pictures of friendship while her species waged war. She thought of the pattern, the endless, repeating pattern of empire and fangs and blood. And she made her choice. I'm going to Earth, Kelix said. Not to destroy it. To talk to them. They'll kill you, the Void Singer warned. Maybe, Kelix agreed. But maybe it's time someone finally tried a different answer. The Confluence Council watched her prepare for what might be a suicide mission, carrying the hope that somewhere, somehow, the pattern could be broken. Even as the war raged on, consuming worlds. The choice. Timeline Epsilon. Earth Orbital Defense Perimeter, Week 5 of the war. Kelix's small diplomatic vessel appeared on every sensor array simultaneously. No stealth, no weapons, just a crystalline being broadcasting on all frequencies. I request parley with the Terran leadership. I come alone and unarmed. On the inexorable, Director Rena Salas stared at the tactical display in disbelief. She's insane. It's obviously a trap. But on Earth, in the Terran Council chambers, Zephyr Blackwood saw something else. An opportunity. Let her land, Zephyr commanded. Under full guard. If the Arbiter wants to talk, we'll listen. Then we'll show the galaxy that we tried diplomacy before we finish this. Rena's face twisted with contempt, but she obeyed. 3 hours later, Kelix materialized in the council chamber, the same room where Rena had received authorization to launch the war. Around her, the 12 council members sat in a semicircle, their faces hard. Zephyr spoke first. You have 5 minutes, Arbiter. Explain why we shouldn't vaporize your ship and resume the offensive. Kelix's matrices pulsed with colors humanity had never seen. Desperation, hope, sorrow all woven together. Because I understand now. What Admiral Cross tried to show us. What your entire species has been screaming across 10,000 years of history. And what's that? Council member Devon Cross, Tavian's younger brother, asked bitterly. That you're terrified, Kelix said simply. Every human empire, every moment where you found your fangs, it wasn't evil. It was fear. Fear of starvation, fear of extinction, fear of being powerless in a universe that doesn't care if you live or die. The council members shifted uncomfortably. They'd expected accusations, demands for surrender. Not understanding. Thashin burned Persepolis because Macedon's soil was poor and its people were hungry, Kelix continued. Hendrix enslaved the Caribbean because Britain's population was exploding and they needed resources. Vex cleansed Viridian Prime because Earth was choking on its own success. And you, she gestured to them all, you started this war because 10 billion humans need somewhere to live. So you understand? Zephyr said coldly. Then you understand why we can't stop. I understand why you think you can't stop, Kelix corrected. But I also understand something else. Something Tavian Cross died trying to show you. She activated a holographic projection. Not battle plans, not weapons data, but something else entirely. Population models. Resource distributions. Technological projections. What you fear, the collapse, the starvation, the extinction, it's not inevitable. The Confluence ran the simulations. With our help, with technology sharing, with coordinated development, humanity can survive. Can thrive. Without the Fangs. Rena Salas, observing via secure channel, cut in with a harsh laugh. Charity from our enemies? You expect us to trust the species we're currently at war with to save us? No, Kellic said. I expect you to make the same choice Tavian made. To finally break the pattern. To be the generation of humans that says, enough. Devon Cross stood abruptly. My brother died because he believed in that fantasy. And what did it get him? A firing squad. His name is cursed in every human settlement. Children spit on his grave. Yes, Kellic said softly. Because he showed you what you really are. And you couldn't bear to see it. The chamber fell into terrible silence. Finally, Zephyr spoke. Let's say we wanted to believe you, Arbiter. Let's say we were willing to try this impossible trust. What would it cost us? Everything, Kellic answered honestly. Your independence. Your sovereignty. Your belief that you can solve every problem with fangs and force. You'd have to become different. Something humanity has never been. Weak, Rena spat over the channel. Evolved, Kellic countered. There's a human philosopher from your ancient past who wrote, the measure of civilization is how it treats its weakest members. You spent 10,000 years proving your strength. Perhaps it's time to prove your civilization. Zephyr looked at her fellow council members. Some showed interest. Others showed rage. All showed fear. We need to deliberate, Zephyr said finally. Arbiter, you'll be held in protective custody while we decide. As guards escorted Kellic away, she heard Devon Cross whisper to another council member, she's right. About the fear. About all of it. Doesn't matter, the other member replied. Fear kept us alive for 10,000 years. You don't abandon what works. But what if, Devon said quietly, what if Tavian was right? What if the Fangs are finally going to kill us? The question hung in the air like a prayer. Or an epitaph. The breaking. Timeline Epsilon. Earth, the deliberation 48 hours later. The Terran Council had been in continuous session for 2 days. The war still raged in distant systems, but here, in the heart of humanity's empire, 12 people wrestled with a choice that would define their species forever. Rena Salas stood before them, presenting her final argument. We are winning. Slowly, bloodily, but winning. In another 6 months the confluence will be broken. Their worlds will be ours. Humanity will have the resources it needs for the next 1,000 years. At what cost? Devon Cross challenged. 15 billion confluence dead? 20? How many genocides before we admit what we've become? Survivors, Rena shot back. That's what we've become. The same thing we've always been. Zephyr Blackwood raised a hand for silence. We've heard your position, Director Salas. And we've heard Arbiter Kellic's proposal. Now we vote. The chamber held its breath. All in favor of accepting the confluence peace terms, immediate ceasefire, technology sharing, integrated development, raise your hand. 5 hands went up. Devon Cross is among them. All in favor of continuing the war to total victory. 5 more hands. Including Rena's proxy vote. Everyone turned to Zephyr. The deciding vote. The ancient woman sat in silence for a long moment, her face unreadable. Finally she spoke. I've lived through 3 human wars, 2 famines, and the collapse of old Earth's ecosystem. I've seen what happens when we compromise, when we show weakness, when we trust others to save us. Devon's face fell. He knew that tone. We die, Zephyr continued. Every single time mercy gets us killed. So we learn to be hard. To be ruthless. To find our fangs and use them. She stood, and the weight of 10 billion souls seemed to press down on her shoulders. But I've also seen what happens when we use those fangs. I've seen the mass graves. The burning worlds. The children like Maven Reeves growing up in a civilization that teaches them to be monsters. And I realize. Her voice cracked. I realize that maybe surviving isn't enough anymore. Maybe Tavian Cross was right. Maybe we need to finally choose what kind of species we want to be. She looked directly at Rena. Not the species that survives at any cost, but the species that survives while remaining human. Rena's face went white with rage. You're condemning us to extinction. No, Zephyr said firmly. I'm giving us a chance at evolution. At being more than our worst impulses. She turned to the council. I vote for peace. For the Arbiter's proposal. For breaking the pattern our species has followed for 10,000 years. The chamber erupted in chaos, but the decision was made. The Confluence Sanctuary World 2 weeks later. The peace treaty was signed on neutral ground, a small moon that had never known war. Calyx and Zephyr put their signatures on a document that would reshape the galaxy. Immediate ceasefire. Withdrawal from occupied systems. Technology exchange. Integrated development councils. Reparations. Accountability. And most importantly, oversight. The Confluence would monitor human expansion. Humanity would submit to external review of its colonial practices. For the first time in their history, humans would have to answer to someone else. This won't be popular, Zephyr said quietly as they watched both fleets stand down. There will be resistance. Maybe even civil war. I know, Calyx replied. Change never is. But it's necessary. Will it work? Zephyr asked. Can humanity really change? Or are we just postponing the inevitable? Calyx's matrices pulsed thoughtfully. I don't know. Your species has a 10,000-year pattern of finding its fangs. That doesn't disappear overnight. But for the first time you're trying. That has to count for something. They watched as human and Confluence ships began joint rescue operations, pulling survivors from the war's wreckage. It was awkward, halting, filled with mutual suspicion. But it was happening. Earth 20 years later. Maven Reeves, now 27 and a xenobiologist, stood in the integrated research facility on Luna. Around her, human and Confluence scientists worked side by side, developing the agricultural technology that would finally solve Earth's resource crisis. Without conquest. Without fangs. It hadn't been easy. The hardliners had fought bitterly. Renasalis had led a military coup that took 3 years to suppress. Entire colonies had declared independence rather than submit to Confluence oversight. But slowly, painfully, humanity was changing. Maven thought of Admiral Tavian Cross, the man history was only now beginning to forgive. His statue stood in the facility's courtyard with a plaque that read, "He showed us what we were becoming and died hoping we could be better." Her Confluence research partner, a young crystalline being named Harmony of New Thoughts, pulsed curiously. Maven? Why do humans display images of those they execute? It seems contradictory. Maven smiled. Because we're contradictory. We're the species that found our fangs in every empire we built. But we're also the species that finally chose to file them down. Both truths matter. Do you still have them? Harmony asked. The fangs? Maven was quiet for a moment, thinking of the protests in New Seattle, of the underground movements that still called for human supremacy, of the simmering resentment that integration had created. Yes, she admitted. We still have them. The capacity for ruthlessness, for violence, for choosing survival over morality. That's part of being human. It always will be. Then how do you ensure you don't use them again? Maven gestured to the facility around them, to humans and aliens working together, to the oversight committees, to the cultural exchange programs, to the new generation growing up with alien friends instead of alien enemies. We build systems that make it harder. We create accountability. We teach our children a different story than the one about empire and conquest. We choose, every single day, to be more than our worst impulses. And if you fail? Harmony pressed. If the pattern returns? Maven thought of Fashion at Persepolis, of Hendrix in the Caribbean, of all the humans who'd stood at the heart of empire and chosen monstrosity. Then we'll have proven we're exactly what we feared we were, she said honestly. Predators wearing civilization as a mask. But at least this time we tried something different. At least this time we chose. She pulled up the latest population projections, humanity spreading across the galaxy not through conquest, but through cooperation. Slowly, carefully. Monitored every step of the way. It was working. Barely. Imperfectly. But working. In the heart of the empire, humanity found its fangs, Maven said softly, repeating the old phrase. But maybe, just maybe, in the ashes of that empire we found something else. What? Harmony asked. Maven looked at the stars beyond the facility windows, at the mixed fleets patrolling together, at the impossible peace that Tavian Cross had died to make possible. Our humanity, she said. Finally. Epilogue, the archive 300 years after the war. Arbiter Calyx closed the final historical file, her matrices settling into something like peace. She'd spent 3 centuries studying humanity, searching for the answer to one question. Could they change? The answer she'd finally learned was complicated. The Fangs were still there. Humanity's capacity for ruthlessness hadn't disappeared. Every few generations there were incidents, colonies that reverted to exploitation, corporations that pushed the boundaries of the oversight agreements, politicians who called for a return to human strength. But each time the systems held. The Confluence Oversight Committees intervened. The younger generations, raised with integration instead of conquest, pushed back. The memory of what humanity had been served as a warning of what they could become again. The pattern had been broken. Not eliminated, but disrupted. Humanity would always struggle with its fangs, with the temptation to solve problems through force rather than cooperation. But now they struggled. That was the difference. Kellix prepared her final report for the Confluence Council. After 3 centuries, she could finally answer the question that had haunted her since she first studied human history. Humanity found its fangs in the heart of every empire they built. The fangs represented their capacity for survival at any cost, the willingness to commit any atrocity if it meant their species would live. For 10,000 years this pattern repeated. Until Admiral Tavian Cross chose to break it. Humanity still possesses those fangs. They always will. But for 300 years they have chosen more often than not to use them. They have built a civilization based not on strength but on restraint. Not on dominance but on cooperation. This arbiter's assessment: humanity is no longer the primary threat to galactic stability. They have earned their place among the confluent species. Not because they lost their fangs but because they learned when not to bite. Recommendation: continued oversight, but with relaxed restrictions. Trust but verify. Hope but remain vigilant. They are, after all, still human. And that means they will always be contradictory, difficult, and dangerous. But also capable of choosing to be better than their history. Perhaps that is the best any species can hope for. Kellix transmitted the report and powered down her review matrices. Somewhere on Earth, Maven Reeves's great-great-grandchildren were probably drawing pictures of alien friends, growing up in a galaxy where humans and other species worked together. The pattern wasn't gone. But it had been broken. And in the end that was enough.